We're back from the break. It's 24 minutes to the top of the hour. That's over 8 a.m. And of course, still driving your business in here on SMB. Definitely quite so many conversations related with business matters. We shall be directing you. Now, this very time, we're heading straight into what's happening. That is around East Africa when it comes to what's making some sort of a business related headlines in there. But of course, don't forget, before we get in there, all this is powered by Zabu. We just made your trading experience much more easy and friendly. Star 292 hashes to magic code, as you'll be available with quite lots of options. You can buy government bonds and securities with as little as 15,000 Ugandan shillings. And definitely getting to understand that the markets open at exactly 8:15 a.m. closing at exactly 3:15 p.m. East African time. That is Monday to Friday, except on the weekends when they don't operate. And also on the public holidays, the markets are not in operation. But of course, on the rest of the days, you can feel free to make as much profits as you can. Zabu made this much more easy. It's quite a great opportunity out there for you to earn a side income. And of course, you get quite sort of vast sorts of earnings to save you from the current economic crisis. Zabu made this much more easy and efficient. No more paperwork, no more hassle. Zabu, my money, my future. All takes East Africa. Do something new. And now heading straight to what's happening. That's around the East African bloc. We start with the International Monetary Fund. And of course, they rate Rwanda's National Bank to raise rates, of course, in order to curb inflation that is ongoing. Now, the International Monetary Fund has directed Rwanda's National Bank, that is to raise interest rates to contain the surging inflationary pressures that is in the economy ahead of the release of the $74.6 million financing that is come next month. Now, the funding for budgetary support is part of the country's policy coordination instrument, that is program, and the Resilience and Sustainability Facility, which the IMF approved in December. That's on December 12th, 2022. Now, the IMF staff and the Rwandan authorities have already reached an agreement on policies needed, that is to complete the initial reviews of the program, paving way, that is for the release of about $74.6 million. Subject to approval by the International Monetary Fund Executive Board, that is come May, just of course next month. Now, the agreement followed the conclusion of an IMF mission in Rwanda led by Tefera, that is from March 22nd to April 4th, to discuss the first reviews of the PCI program and the RSF that particular matter. Now, of course, we realize that the Rwanda's economy is a little bit vulnerable, depending on what's really moving in all around. But, however, the IMF noted that the Rwandan government needs to continue implementing a credible fiscal consolidation plan, of course, coupled with tighter monetary policy stance while allowing greater exchange rate flexibility in order to ensure a stable macroeconomic environment. Now, according to the fund, the Rwandan economy remains vulnerable to the shock-prone external environment, and the authorities will need to urgently further tighten, that is, the fiscal and monetary policies to rebuild policy buffers. Still, according to the IMF, data-dependent monetary policy and strengthening communication would help to contain the second-round effects, of course, and anchor inflation expectations. The Rwandan authorities will also need to sustain their ongoing efforts to strengthen institutions, that is to deliver and monitor Rwanda's emissions, climate change objectives to help mobilize and efficiently allocate additional resources, that is according to the IMF. Now, Rwanda's economy recorded a strong growth of 8.2%, that is in 2022, while headline inflation remained high at 20.8%, that is in February this year. Economic activity fueling import demand added to existing pressures on foreign exchange reserves tied to higher commodity prices and the tightening of global financing conditions, and of course further exacerbated domestic as well as external imbalances, what has just been mentioned in there. Now, the rise in food prices linked to the weak agricultural performance due to unfavorable weather conditions and strong domestic demand kept headline inflation persistently above 20% in the recent months, with high core inflation at 14.4%, that is in February. Now, of course, this is signaling broad-based and persistent inflationary pressures that is within the economy. Now, according to the IMF, robust import and demand coupled with high commodity prices and tightening global financing conditions have weakened Rwanda's external position from regarding that very matter. So the IMF is calling upon the Bank of Rwanda, the central bank, in order to rise the rates. That is to curb the inflation. But of course, hope this will really be of great influence, because this has been one of the conditions. That is, if Rwanda is to get 74.6 million US dollars from IMF fund, which is yet to be approved. That is next month. The condition is that the bank should raise the interest rates for that. All right, now away from Rwanda, let's cross over and see what's happening in Tanzania. And of course, now we're talking about relief for Tanzania motorists as EWURA reduces, that is, the fuel prices. Now, the motorists in Tanzania will pay less for fuel now this month following the reduction, that is, of wholesale and retail prices of petrol of petrol and diesel. Now, the national regulator, that is the Energy and Water Utilities Regulatory Authority, that is EWURA, announced a drop in the fuel prices across the country starting Wednesday. Of course, they started yesterday. Now, in a statement signed by the authority's Director General James, that is Moenyuke, EWURA said retail prices of petrol, diesel, and kerosene imported through Dar es Salaam port have decreased, of course, that is by 187 Tanzanian shillings, and of course, talking about 284 Tanzanian shillings, 169 Tanzanian shillings, that is per liter respectively, compared to the prices that were published on March 1st, 2023. Now, with the new rates in Dar es Salaam, motorists will buy petrol at 2,781 shillings. That is petrol. Will buy petrol at a liter at 2,781, diesel at 2,847, and kerosene at 2,929. I'm talking about Tanzanian shillings. That is per liter respectively. Now, the most expensive selling point remains Chera district in Kagera region, where petrol now costs 3,019 Tanzanian shillings. Diesel costs 3,084 Tanzanian shillings, and kerosene 3,167 of course Tanzanian shillings, that is per liter respectively. Consequently, in the northern regions of Tanga, Kilimanjaro, Arusha, and Manyara, retail prices of petrol and diesel for April 2023 have decreased, that is by 150 shillings, and we're talking about 231 shillings per liter still respectively. So that means petrol decreased by 158 Tanzanian shillings, and diesel decreased by 231, petrol by 158. So we get to see what is happening in there. Now, the energy regulator noted that the prices differ from one location to another, due to the differences at the recommended loading port and transportation costs at the same time. So that is quite some good news to the Tanzanians in there, and definitely that is going to have quite a great impact when it comes to economic activity and the velocity of money. Now let's wind this up as we take a look at Rwanda still. And now these are matters to do with ICT, as Kenya and Rwanda sign a trade, sign trade, innovation, and youth deals. Now, the agreements further seek to contribute significantly, that is to the coordination of the East African community and the African Union level towards the 2063 agenda. And of course, the 2063 agenda involves the aspect of digitization of the entire continent, whereby, of course, at least there is some sort of usage of ICT-related services all across the continent. Now, Kenya plans to strengthen bilateral relationship with Rwanda in cooperatives development, youth empowerment, and ICT. Now, this is after President Ruto and his Rwanda counterpart Paul Kagame agreed on 10 areas of cooperation during a two-day state visit, that is to Rwanda. Now, the agreement seeks to establish mechanisms for effective cooperation, that is in education, ICT, gender and child development, youth capacity development, and cooperatives, said in a statement when they met. Now, it added that the initiative will also foster development cooperation in correctional services, diplomatic training, agriculture, and health at the same time. Now, the agreements further seek to contribute significantly to the coordination of the East African community and African Union level towards the 2063 agenda on trade and investment. Now, data by Trading Economics puts the country's export to Rwanda at $278 million. That was in 2021, whereas Rwanda's export to Kenya stands at 11 million. Of course, that's about 1.4 billion shillings, and of course, as of 2022. Now, with almost 80% of global trade being dependent on shipping, the country enjoys direct access to most global markets as opposed to Rwanda, which is a landlocked country. Now, with the signing of the agreements, the president foresees synergy in boosting the nation's trade relations, of course, in potential areas for regional growth and development at the same time. Now, of course, this is quite very interesting. We see quite lots of cooperations happening within the East African country between two different nations. And now this time around, we see Kenya and Rwanda. And now we also still see further in this report that this will incorporate the consolidation of partnerships between youth institutions, research institutions, and of course, and youth centers at the same time for these two countries. Now, the agreement will be also a ride that is to promote technical development for cooperatives, which promote investment in cooperation sector, joint ventures, technology development, and establishment of market linkages for cooperatives products at the same time. So that is something very key. Now, of course, Rwanda and Kenya have also signed and ratified the one area network, of course, to ease communication and facilitate bilateral trade. Well, very revolutionary aspect in there for those two countries, and definitely whatever's happening in there, if it's a success, of course, it's also a success for the East African community at the same time. Well, that is it for the East Africa, of course, what's happening around there. But now let's cross over to the international scene and take a look at what's making headlines in the world of business. All right, now, of course, starting in here, we see Johnson & Johnson, which offers $9 billion, of course, US dollars to settle talc claims. Now, Johnson & Johnson has proposed to pay almost $9 billion US dollars to resolve tens of thousands of lawsuits, of course, it faces in North America that claim its baby powder and other talc-based products cause cancer. Wow. That's something to really look into. But of course, Johnson's has been quite a big brand. Of course, majority of you, I know you relate to it. But now this other report, of course, this is something worthy of investigation and not to take lightly. Now, the healthcare giant said it still believed the claims were specious, but of course was hoping the new statement offer would help conclude its legal battle. Now, the figure marks a big boost over the $2 billion it had proposed previously. Now, the new offer has significant support from people tied to the case, and of course the company said. Now, the company is facing more than 40,000 lawsuits from former customers who say using the talc-based baby powder caused cancer, including some who alleged the product contained cancer-causing asbestos. Yes, asbestos in the way. Of course, those chemicals that are put into that very powder. Now, before that decision, the company had sold the baby powder for almost 130 years. 130 years, of course, in business. It continues to sell a version of the product that contains, of course, cornstarch. Now, the company has been trying to resolve the lawsuits in bankruptcy court since 2021 after creating a subsidiary responsible for such claims being put out there, that is by the public. But its efforts ran into trouble after an earlier bankruptcy court ruling found the subsidiary was not in financial distress and of course could not use the bankruptcy system to resolve the lawsuits. Now, Johnson & Johnson said it had won a majority of talc lawsuits against it, yes, but it has been stuck with some significant losses, including one decision in which 22 women were awarded a judgment of more than $2 billion US dollars. Now, Johnson & Johnson said it had commitments from about 60,000 current claimants to support the new settlements terms regarding that. Of course, the baby powder in there, of course, the case is in there, but of course, there is also understanding how is this going to really transpire in that way. You know, that's the disadvantage when it comes to when you're dealing in something and you become some sort of a monopoly. Well, in the long run, definitely that is expected to happen. Though it's the first time we're hearing such cases, after quite some very long time in our entire childhood, we've all been witnessing this powder, Johnson & Johnson, and now this very time around, coming up with some people claiming it's actually causing cancer. That is something very serious and, of course, worthy watching in towards that matter. So that is a matter regarding Johnson & Johnson offering $9 billion to settle, of course, the talc claims. Now, away from that, let's cross over to what's happening. That is in Amazon. Of course, Amazon closing UK best online shop, of course, Book Depository. Now, the UK best online store, Book Depository, is being closed down by its permanent company. That is US technology giant, that is Amazon. Now, the Book Depository has told customers it will cease operations later this month after almost 2 decades in business. Now, it comes after Amazon announced plans to cut thousands of jobs as it shakes up its businesses, that is globally. Now, the news was met with sadness by many of the Book Depository's customers, of course, from around the world, of course, who are really very disappointed. And now, of course, now this is a statement that comes in from in there. They say that we are sorry to let you know that the Book Depository will be closing on 26th of April 2023. That's a statement that the company made. Quite very sad. Now, customers can continue to order books until midday UK time. That is on its last day of trading. Now, the company's website added regarding that very comment. Now, Book Depository was founded in 2004 by former Amazon employee Andrew Crawford and his business partner Stuart Felton. Yes, they came up with that company. Now, the global online book retailer, which was bought by Amazon in 2011, has offices in London, Gloucester, Madrid, Cape Town, and Chennai, with fulfillment centers in the United Kingdom and Australia. Now, thousands of Book Depository customers, including best-selling authors, reacted with sadness over the announcement. Now, this year Amazon has been slashing thousands of jobs as it aims to make a major cost when it comes to savings. Now, as part of the shakeup, the company announced changes to its book business, including the decision to top-selling magazines and newspaper subscriptions on its e-book device, Kindle. Now, of course, in a blog, taking a look here, that in a blog post in January, Chief Executive, that is Andy Jassy, said a total of just 18,000 roles would be cut off across the company, including job losses and, of course, and so many other related aspects. So that is Amazon closing the UK best online shop, Book Depository. Quite very sad for the people that have been transacting business with this particular, of course, company. Now, finally, as we wind up the international news, we'll take a look at South Africa. And now we see that South Africa ends state of disaster and, of course, declared over power cuts. And, of course, this country's been having an energy crisis of some sort of. Now, South Africa has revoked a national state of disaster declared in February to manage a crippling electricity crisis, the government said on Wednesday. Now, the state of disaster gave the government additional powers to respond to the crisis. That is including, of course, by permitting emergency procurement procedures with fewer bureaucratic delays and less oversight. Now, the government will now work through its energy crisis committee to reduce the impact of power cuts using existing legislation and contingency arrangements, cooperative governance and traditional affairs. And, of course, the Minister Thembi said in a statement regarding that matter. Now, the government decided to terminate the disaster regulations in view of those developments, it said. Now, the state of disaster legislation was used to enable health authorities, of course, to respond more swiftly to the COVID-19 pandemic. But some analysts doubted it would help the government expand power supply much quicker, as they can really anticipate. Well, that is it regarding South Africa. Of course, ending the state of disaster declared over the power cuts in that matter. And of course, the policies of course, designing a framework to make sure that this is all put in order to avoid other related disasters in that matter. Well, 4 minutes to the top of the hour, and this very time, let's get into a short commercial break. When I return, still have quite many very interesting discussions, and of course, maybe just to update you a little bit on what we shall be, the anticipations. We shall be looking at something to do with the 50 billion climate finance facility from the Uganda Development Bank that is to promote the green economy. More of those discussions are coming up shortly after the break.